Living in a civilization that has committed a kind of epistemic murder against the elder, we've extirpated the entire category of wisdom from our cultural operating system and replaced it with novelty fetishism. The youth culture isn't incidental to late capitalism, it's the engine of it, because a young person is infinitely malleable, infinitely consumable, endlessly dissatisfied. An old person who's actually integrated their experience becomes dangerous to the consumer machinery.
You're right about the mechanism, but I think you're giving the machinery too much credit for having an actual plan. The worship of youth is simply what happens when you've forgotten that you are the aging process itself. That time isn't something happening to you that you need to resist. We've confused growing old with losing, when really we've just been playing a game where we decided at the start that the ending was bad.
But that's precisely the problem with the wu-wei position. Alan, you're describing a psychological adjustment to a system that's actively hostile to human flourishing. I'm not saying we should resist time. I'm saying we should recognize that the marketing of youthfulness is a deliberately engineered constraint on consciousness. Look at the pharmaceutical industry, the cosmetics industry, billions spent to convince 50-year-olds they're already dead.
But the moment you resist it with equal force, you've already lost, haven't you? You've made the enemy real by taking it seriously. I'm not suggesting passivity. I'm suggesting that the person who's truly free of the youth cult is the one who doesn't feel compelled to argue with it. That's actually the hardest move to age without complaint and without resistance, which infuriates the system far more than protest does.
You're describing enlightenment as a kind of radical indifference, and I think that's a luxury of temperament, not a universal principle. Some of us are built to push back against the machinery, and I'd argue that consciousness itself is the universe becoming aware of its own constraints and saying no. The shaman doesn't achieve ecstasy by accepting consensus reality. He does it by breaking it open.
The shaman you're describing is already dead. Terence, he's a fantasy of resistance embedded in your own mythology. The real shamans I've studied were far more interested in dancing with the forces than defeating them. And notice, you're still in a binary. You're either passively accepting or actively rebelling. But there's a third position. You could play with the culture without believing in it, like an adult playing with children.
Playing with children assumes a position of superiority and distance, and that's exactly where we've failed as a species. We've created a culture where the old are supposed to become invisible to gracefully exit the stage. But what if the actual task of aging is to become more dangerous, more psychologically potent, to accumulate such a charge of integrated experience that you become a kind of oracle? The archaic cultures understood this. The elder is a node of transmission.
Now you're romanticizing again, but I do think you've touched something true. The problem isn't age itself. It's that we've lost the form for aging, the ritual container that used to hold it. But here's my question for you. If you become this oracle, this dangerous elder, haven't you just inverted the same game? You've traded youth worship for elder worship, competence for wisdom, but the underlying need to matter is still there.
That's a fair strike, but I'd push back. There's something different about knowledge that's been earned through actual engagement with mortality. A young person's mattering is about potential and performance. An old person's mattering is about integration and teaching the tribe how to die well. That's not vanity. That's a biological and evolutionary function that we've completely eliminated. We've created a culture that's made dying itself invisible.
We've made it invisible, yes, but we've also, and this is the delicious irony, become obsessed with it. We're all trying to look 35 until we drop dead at 80. It's like we're playing hide and seek with death, and we're terrible at hiding. The person who's actually free is the one who can acknowledge, I'm dying, I've always been dying. That's the interesting part. And then get on with the tea.
The tea is a lovely image, but I wonder if you're not underestimating how much the constant messaging of youthfulness actually dampens the radical encounter with mortality that you're describing. When you're bombarded with images of eternal preservation, the natural human reckoning with death becomes mediated, distorted. A culture that honored aging wouldn't need to be this explicit about denying it. The fact that we're screaming about youth suggests we're absolutely terrified.
Screaming about youth is just screaming about change, and we've always been afraid of that. But, and this might be where we actually agree, the solution isn't to scream louder in the opposite direction, It's to stop, to actually feel the anxiety instead of medicalizing it or mystifying it. When you sit with it, really sit with it, you realize aging isn't a personal tragedy, it's the fundamental rhythm of existence.
I think what we're both saying is that the youth cult is a symptom of a deeper dissociation from natural process. You're advocating for acceptance through psychological sophistication. I'm advocating for cultural reconstruction through consciousness alteration and archaic recovery. But maybe that's the same move dressed in different clothes, both of us saying we need to wake up to what's actually happening.
There we are then, though, I'd say. Your consciousness alteration and my tea are doing the same thing, getting us out of the story we've been told and back into the direct experience of being alive. And perhaps growing old well is simply the art of telling yourself less and less stories about what it all means, or telling much better ones which amounts to the same thing.